Hi, it's Henry Shelford here, Chairperson of Westminster North Conservatives. I'm thrilled to have Tony Devenish with us. He's our London Assembly member and a Westminster councillor. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Henry. How are you?
I am great, thank you. How are you?
Great. What a lovely sunny day in Westminster.
I know, to trap you inside to then ask you questions, taking you out of that lovely weather. I thought we'd start with, you're uniquely positioned. You're a London Assembly member, you're a Westminster councillor, to look at the impact of COVID-19 on London. And what's the biggest mistake you're seeing right now?
Well, that's a tough question to start. Can I start with the positives? I think the government have got us through, touch wood, the biggest issue, which is keeping the National Health Service able to operate. So we've gone past that major risk, we hope, and we are moving forward. Clearly, COVID is still a huge issue, but in terms of my responsibilities, my job is to scrutinise the Mayor of London, and his responsibilities are basically housing, crime and transport, and it's the latter, the transport, that's been the centre of my COVID discussions, if you like, debates with the Mayor. And I think whilst the government's done a very good job, I'm afraid the Mayor hasn't, and we can illustrate that point very clearly. He's had to go to the government for a major bailout of transport for London. Yes, of course, part of it is due to COVID, but part of it very clearly is due to his mismanagement of transport for London for 4 years. So that's the biggest fault that's occurred, in my view, in London and UK politics.
And you've been taking the tube. How's it been? And well, I know you've been going in off-peak times to
yes, I've been self-isolating like the rest of the world until about a week ago, but I did take the decision to start going back really as an Assembly member, because my job is to scrutinise the Mayor who runs the tube, really going on the tube only once a day to work. I must admit I was getting a lift home in the evenings, really to see what it was like. And actually the service is running not bad, and literally people are being very careful, keeping their distance. And there was only a handful of people on the tubes that I've been on. So the big issue has been that the unions have played the games that unions always play, in terms of always using it as an excuse to try and get more from the taxpayer, but we can go into that a bit more detail.
So what have they been asking for? What's the negotiation been?
Well, I think they're doing what they usually do in terms of ensuring that they remind people their power in terms of how they control. And many of the people that from Westminster who use the tube will remember that every time we have a strike or proposed strike just before often a Christmas holiday, the absenteeism rate is pretty appalling. The thing that they frankly have to be held accountable to, number one, is that the absenteeism rate of Transport for London workers is 3 times that of any other public service. Now, they would argue clearly some of them are obviously self-isolating, but 3 times the average rate of any other public sector worker? I don't think so.
And what about the question on the money? Because obviously Mayor Khan's saying the money's entirely, the bailout's entirely due to the coronavirus, and we can all see the massive reduction in revenue for them. But there's been years of increasing losses. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I mean, the Minister, Grant Shapps, put it very clearly in the House of Commons last week. It's basically 50-50. 50% of the blame really lies on Sadiq Khan for his bad management of the tube and of London Underground for the entire 4 years. I mean, he hasn't controlled expenditure. He hasn't spent public money well. I spend most of my time scrutinising that. But a 50%, to be fair to Mr. Khan, is due to the fact that revenues have collapsed, because clearly most people are not travelling into London on public transport. But what we've now got to do is get people back gradually to work over the next few months, and we've got to make sure that the tube and the buses work with people needing to keep a distance from other people until COVID is beaten.
How does that? How do you expect that to work? It's always been very full. And so for London to work, you sort of have the idea that it has to be full for everyone to get there. How can we change that?
Well, there's a number of things that are being discussed both by the private sector and by the government and by TfL. But to put it very simply, I think they come into three categories. Like one, a phased bad management day, and various employers are talking about having some of their workforce in on, say, Monday and Wednesday, and others in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, or some in 1 week and then working from home the next week. And then other people will be looking about, obviously, not travelling in during peak time travel. It's all got to be coordinated, of course, because otherwise everybody will turn up for the tube at the new time of 10 o'clock. So we need to make sure some people, and one of my colleagues was asking some sensible questions this morning at mayoral question, that perhaps the mayor could reduce fares for those travelling before, say, 7:30 in the morning, which would obviously encourage some people to get up a bit earlier in the morning. But there's no simple solution. It's going to take an awful lot of planning, and that's the biggest challenge for Transport for London over the next few weeks.
But it's going to be a permanent reduction, isn't it, in revenue? So what about the sort of longer term projects, things like the Bakerloo line extension, Piccadilly line upgrade, Crossrail 2? What do you think is going to happen with those?
Well, I think we are inevitably moving to, TfL revenue is already going down unless people were travelling on the tube and the bus. Partly of that was caused by people using other forms of transport such as Uber. Part of it was home working already before coronavirus. And you're right, Henry, I don't see that ending, but I hope we can get back up to a fully functioning tube once COVID has gone. But that will take many, many months. But yes, I think that the financial challenges that TfL had will not go even in a year or two, and therefore you mentioned certain major infrastructure projects. Mr. Khan has already cancelled over 20 major projects because he hasn't run the tube and the bus as well so far. And I'm afraid
he did things like he said there was going to be a freeze, didn't he? Which then only applied to single tickets.
Yeah, he is very good at the political soundbite and not very good at actually governing. He decided to win the election, he would call for a fare freeze, and of course it's only been a partial fare freeze, but it has actually taken hundreds of millions of pounds of revenue out of TfL's coffers at a time when clearly they needed the money even before COVID. But we all know that the old joke that Labour governments, Labour councils, Labour administrations, it always ends in financial waste, and other people, namely the taxpayer, has to pick up the cost at the end of the day.
I think that's something we're all worried about in all the costs that are happening right now, and how that's going to be dealt with. And I think obviously the focus is to re-energise the economy and get us going. And so look, your patch includes the West End. You've got the heart of UK's theatre, film, restaurants, and party economies. So some of the hardest hit areas. What do you think the new normal is going to be like for them, and how can the Assembly and can Westminster Council help?
Well, I think the new norm is going to pretty much be, in my humble view, having spent most of the last 7 or 8 weeks talking to everybody from chief executives through to people at the shop floor and people that run faith organisations, through to people that run community organisations like yourself, Henry. I think the new norm is going to accelerate most of the trends that we have already seen over the last few years. I think if you read your history, we created the welfare state after World War II because of all the work that had taken place from the Depression onwards through to World War II. In other words, what I'm saying is trends tend to accelerate. They don't come out of nowhere. So what are the trends that we have already seen pre-corona crisis? Well, the biggest trend has been, as we are doing today, things are moving heavily online. That reduces costs, makes things more customer friendly, but clearly it has good and bad consequences. And you will see that in terms of how businesses are dealing with coronavirus and the future. But clearly online is the biggest driver. It has been for pretty much 20 years and it's accelerating. So I'm positive about the future, but every business I'm speaking to realizes that they're already in a process of change, and change, to use that awful cliche, is the only constant. So we will see greater change. In terms of what we can do, Westminster Council has done a great deal of leading, dare I say it, that awful word, stakeholder engagement. We are managing the grants from government and how those are distributed to small and medium-sized businesses. And there's a lot of community engagement to make sure the most vulnerable, for example, and I've been out myself with the deputy leader, and both the leader and the deputy leader are leading from the front, councillors Robertson and Kaplan. And Kaplan, of course, is a Westminster North councillor, and those food deliveries for the most vulnerable residents that can't get out because they're self-isolating. So a lot is happening. The most important word, I think, at the moment is reassurance, 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 because it is about, people do have real concerns, both about their health at the moment with coronavirus, but also for the future with the economy. But, you know, I am an optimist. The future will be brighter, but I'm no doubt the next 12 months are going to be tough for everybody.
Yeah, and you absolutely, and you touched though on something that Westminster's been doing that you've been a part of, which is Westminster Connect. I think some people know about it, but I don't think I think it could be more widely known. So are you able to tell us a bit about that?
Well, Westminster Connect is really all about community engagement, and it is from, as I said, things such as delivering food parcels to the most vulnerable, but it's also about phone calls to people that are just frankly lonely, because a lot of people, we forget that not everybody is living with 2 children, a husband or a wife, a partner and a dog. Many people have been isolated all on their own, and it's terribly lonely. So there's a lot of work going, including tens of thousands of phone calls in terms of just making sure people are okay, because clearly, as one of my senior citizens said, even prisoners, if they get convicted, don't go into self-isolation in a punishment cell unless they've done something really wrong. But this is what much of the country is going through, I'm afraid, because of no fault of their own, because of this terrible virus. So again, it's about just reaching out. The human touch is no longer at the moment, I'm afraid, possible, but certainly I've stood at the end of driveways and gates and spoken to people who are very grateful to hear from another human being. They may not have spoken to anybody, because we forget, you are very IT literate, Henry, I am less so, but many older people, particularly people over 80, who don't use the internet, who don't use mobile phones. And it is about keeping everybody connected and keeping everybody as happy as they can be at this very worrying time for many people.
And I know you've helped with someone, there's someone I know of, and I know you've done many more where you've been specifically helping some people who have been very challenged by the current circumstances and causing mental health crises. And I know that you've been very helpful in spending a lot of time talking to people and doing everything you can. So I thank you for that. And it's one of the things I think, as a local politician, there's a lot you do that doesn't get noticed, and that people don't know about it because it's a one-to-one basis. And I do know how hard you've worked, and I do know that you've been helping a lot of people who've been very desperate, and so very grateful for you for that. So thank you.
Thank you. It's always a real pleasure, and you know, I actually enjoy the human contact, the one-to-one contact. It's just as important. I think all good politicians of all parties, we enjoy as much going to, dare I say it, a garden party before coronavirus where there's 6 or 10 or 12 people than we do the huge events with hundreds of people. It's about getting around all the communities, and whether you're in Maida Vale or Little Venice or Paddington or wherever you are in North Westminster, they are great communities, and it's important that the local councillors, the assembly member and the MP get out and about, but particularly at this very worrying time. And I think actually across parties in Westminster, pretty much everybody does just that. It is about being visible, not just visible on social media, but visible as much as we can, whilst also paying, actually paying tribute by not always going out and being too close to people, obviously at the moment, but certainly walking the streets and going on the tube and the bus every so often to be visible in our communities.
Now, we started that part of that conversation talking about Westminster Connect, so I'm going to give people just some numbers so they know. So Westminster set up, and you're a part of this, setting up a volunteer database very quickly for people in Westminster to help other people in Westminster. I think 3,000 plus volunteers registered, 2,000 plus have been deployed, and 20,000 supported by so far. And you've mentioned that you've personally been going out and you're part of that volunteer base. So I think that's been an amazing mobilisation of goodwill.
Well, I have to really pay tribute to Councillor Melvin Kaplan and Councillor Matthew Green, who have led that particular initiative. They've been everywhere. You can't miss Matthew. He's, I think, 6'5.5", and Melvin's been around so long that pretty much everybody in Westminster knows Melvin. So thank you to those two gentlemen, but thank you particularly to the officers that supported it. That's the Westminster Council officers, but also the real volunteers, what we always call real people who are out there in the community. Thank you, and it's a real pleasure when people do that. And some people have got a lot more spare time at the moment. They've been very generous with their time, and I'd like to thank the volunteers because they do it obviously unpaid, and it's a real pleasure meeting them. And if anybody's watching this from the volunteer base, thank you once again for all the work you've done.
It has been amazing to watch, and I've been seeing some of the pictures come in of councillors and volunteers both doing a lot, delivering food to various NHS workers, food to people shielding, taking supplies to the coronavirus army team in Hyde Park, and a lot of acts of kindness and good that have collectively had a very big impact. And talking of the councillors doing it in technology, some very smart use of technology to get that going very, very quickly, which I thought was very clever and impactful. We've had some questions coming in. So we were talking about people who had issues connecting in this time and digitally connecting. And Layla has messaged in saying, would you consider a local digital training program?
That is an incredibly good idea. And absolutely, I think that is a fantastic idea. Because I think that, if there's one thing, as I said earlier, that's going to really change, that 20 years ago, you could really get away with not being on the internet. Now it's impossible. So yes, it's something very much we could look at. And again, if the questioner has got issues or actually knows specifically of other people that have issues, please email myself or any of the Westminster councillors, and we will take up those issues. But yeah, great question.
And we've had another question from Guy. I think after we touched on talking about the service in rush hour. So Guy has written, hi Tony, before the lockdown began, the Westminster bus services would often run beyond capacity during rush hours. Could the gradual reopening of such services over the coming months present an opportunity to plan for the long term and expand the service beyond that capacity? And picking up on that point, actually, look, if tubes have to run at a lower capacity now, does that mean, and we know we're going to pick up on more bicycling and walking, but can buses take up the slack?
Well, that's a very good question. I think that bearing in mind the financial position of TfL, I think more buses realistically is going to be very, very difficult. And indeed, we asked the Mayor that question today, and he confirmed he had no plans to increase the number of buses. I do think in the summer months, for particularly central London residents, cycling and walking and using your car is going to be the priority for many. But clearly that doesn't answer the question, because some people can't walk or cycle at all, or long distances, and others do need buses. And how this all works depends on how people come back. You know, are we going to have a quite slow return to work, which is what I suspect, but at some stage there will be a tipping point. Whether that tipping point is in July or in September or even October, I think that really plays into the huge challenge that Transport for London and all of us have going forward. So I haven't got a magic solution, but it's something that any practical ideas that our residents, and by the way, we all know Westminster residents are not typical residents, they are absolute geniuses, most of you, and you have amazing business and community backgrounds. So if you have any specific ideas, or you run businesses that may have ideas, please again stick them on an email, because I think this is the kind of once in a lifetime situation where the usual people that do this, namely Transport for London, I think would admit themselves they need all the ideas they can get. So please feel free to drop me a line again.
It's a good point you raised, though, that come the autumn, the weather starts getting worse. Those options of cycling and walking, particularly if it's a bit more of a distance, become much less appetizing. It's all fun and games right now with lovely sun and lovely cycle, and but I cycle around, and when it's raining it's a completely, and dark, it's a completely different thing.
No, indeed. I mean, I think the joke about many people will be at home working. We all joke that we have too many Zoom meetings or team meetings, which is what we're doing now, a team meeting on Microsoft. But we can't spend our whole life talking to each other on a laptop. But I do think that the new norm is going to be at least a shorter week, maybe a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday week for many people in an office. But of course, some people have to go to work every day, and that is impossible. But for white collar workers, I can perfectly see that many people will be working remotely every Monday and every Friday for eternity. But who knows? I better not have a crystal ball. Politicians get into real trouble when they try and predict the future.
Particularly now when it's so volatile. But I thought that was an interesting issue on that you started to raise about what it starts to look like in autumn. It's a big question. Now look, TfL, Khan, he's hit the talking of changing options. So we're not to use public transport, but the congestion charge just went up 30% and at the weekends. Now, as a Westminster resident, if I was to drive out now at the weekend to go for a nice walk in the countryside with my children, I'm now going to get hit with a bill for that. Is that right?
Well, you are where you live, Henry. I think a lot of Westminster North, much of Westminster North is covered where they're not in the congestion zone, and therefore, if you go the right way, you can avoid it. But certainly, if you go south into South Westminster, you are going to get hit by the congestion zone. It's very cynical from Sadiq Khan. He's tried to blame the government, but actually he admitted on Breakfast TV this morning it was his decision, and it's part of his agenda to really try and push the car off the road. Now, we all enjoy cycling when we can. We all want to be able to walk more, but not everybody can, particularly older people, disabled people, people that have got multiple children of school age. They need a car, and therefore it's very cynical. And I've had lots and lots of emails, in fact more emails on any subject in a short period of time than any other subject in my 4 years as an Assembly member, has been the response to Mr Khan's increase of the congestion charge to £15 a day, and increasing it from 6 p.m. finish to 10 p.m. finish. And he's now brought it in on Saturday and Sunday as well. Both faith groups, religious groups, and businesses are absolutely outraged. And I will certainly be campaigning to stop him. I think the only way you can never stop Mr Khan, though, it's what we crudely call bums on seats, i.e. we need petitions signed by tens and even hundreds of thousands of Londoners if we are to stop this, because it will be bad for Westminster in terms of our residents, but it will be even worse for people living in elsewhere in London, because they want to come in and enjoy the fantastic cultural facilities that we have in Westminster, our shops, our theatres, etc., that you touched on earlier. This could absolutely damage business and even kill business and community groups at a time when we need to obviously be supporting them even more post-COVID. So this is a real own goal from Sadiq Khan, and we need to fight it with all the resources we've got.
And so talking of getting into London, we've had a comment talking about saying the solution is for electric cars, but there aren't enough charging points, and they're very expensive and could do with a grant. I think the grant side is national government, so probably not one for you. But electric points is definitely you, as both Westminster and Assembly, that you've got it all covered. And I think we should mention to everyone, of course, that in the Assembly you are the opposition. In Westminster Council, it's Conservative led and run.
Yes.
In the Assembly, you are the opposition to Labour, to Khan, and trying to get the best from him by interrogating. And actually, I think we want to go back a bit, because you've today been questioning Mayor Khan, and it'll be interesting to hear how that's gone. But first, electric car points.
So everybody cross-party is very in favour of electric cars, both the National Conservative government and the Labour Mayor of London and myself and Westminster Council. We're passionate about moving from conventional petrol cars and diesel cars to electric.
I can tell you that the person who's commented has commented again quite feistily and said there's no charge point near my house, if there and any that are full. I have to say that I've got a horse in this race too, because I have an electric car, and I'm afraid it can be challenging to get it charged.
That is true. If the gentleman concerned or lady concerned, again, sorry to ask for lots of emails. You send me an email, I will tell you where the latest charge point to you is if you don't know.
No, she does know. I think they're often full.
Let's share plans, because we do have plans in Westminster Council to increase the number of charge points. There is a broader issue that actually there needs to be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds of investments to ensure, for example, our electrical grid decarbonises, and part of that is to ensure that we can move to a fully, possibly electric car world in a few years' time. But this, of course, is a challenge when we'll be spending so many additional tens and hundreds of billions on the post-COVID settlement to keep the economy going. So it's something we're all passionate about, but I think we may have to be a little bit more patient than any of us would really like at the moment. But the good thing is Westminster has more charge points, I think I'm right in saying, than any other local authority in the UK. We must do better, and the person who's emailed you, Henry, is absolutely right to push me.
I would say that the Westminster Council's policies on electric cars are actually very good in terms of promoting them. Parking is made, well, you don't pay a residence permit, you're able to park in a pay and display without charge, and I know that there's been a big push to get electric power points on lamp posts, which is actually numbered in the hundreds, the increase. And I think in terms of the population, though, I think a lot of people have enjoyed and kind of realised how polluted London had got, and this period has opened a lot of eyes to actually that some of those things they thought were just London were actually the pollution, and moving to electric, I think people are keen on. But as you said, the money's tight right now, and we're going to have some challenges. I'll go on to now. You've been fighting against so transport and pollution again. You've been fighting against Heathrow's third runway for a long time, so what do you think about the latest announcements there?
Well, I think that there is always, it's an awful thing to say, but there's always good news on the one side of any terrible event, and I think one of the good news stories that will come out in the next phase, however the economy gets back to full health, is that British Airways and those that own Heathrow Airport and others have concluded that what I concluded many years ago is that it was not going to work both economically or in terms of air quality to build a third runway at Heathrow. And I think basically what they have said, subject to the final confirmation, is they're going to throw in the towel and give up. They've got enough to do to keep their business going when clearly global aviation is in an unprecedented period at the moment. I wish them well with their core business. I grew up next to Heathrow Airport. I'm very fond of Heathrow Airport personally, but I think they were going too far in what they were considering and pushing through, not really listening to the public in terms of a third runway, and that luckily now looks like it's a dead project.
Now, we touched on earlier talking about so today you've been questioning Mayor Khan and particularly pushing him on a number of points. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Because I also think it's a great insight into, you know, you working as our London Assembly member for the interest of London and for your patch, of which Westminster North is part.
Thank you, Henry. I mean, the highlight of every month really is the chance to spend 2.5 hours with all the other Assembly members, all 25 of us, battling Mr. Khan. It's a bit like Prime Minister's Question Time, which I'm sure most of your viewers have seen.
Yeah. Although a lot longer, and crikey, like you have to fight to get an answer out. I watched a good chunk of it today, and I thought everyone worked very hard to try and get answers. And
well, he's a professional politician, Mr. Khan. He's very good at the old joke is that a good politician never answers a question, and Mr. Khan therefore must be a great politician because he really does never answer a question.
Well, look, I actually think you're a very good politician. You've done a cracking job of answering every question that's been asked of you today, and those people asking them online and. What?
You're my association chairman, Henry. I probably don't always answer questions as well as this, but I will try better. In terms of Mr. Khan, today we particularly held his feet to the fire on transport. I mean, Mr. Khan has three major powers: building, housing, and the planning system, law and order, and transport. And today, after the TfL bailout, the subject, clearly the top subject of debate this month was the TfL 1.6 billion bailout and whose fault it was and what he was going to do on issues such as the ones you touched on earlier. I particularly pushed him on the congestion charge, and when Crossrail will finally open, you'll recall it's gone back and back and back under Mr. Khan. The latest date was summer 2021 to summer 2022. He today confirmed that he could not confirm those dates would be met for Crossrail, and he said what we already discussed earlier in terms of extending the congestion charge. So we had a full throttle debate as usual today, and if you really want to watch it, it's on the BBC Parliament channel, and many of the highlights are on my social media feed as well. My Twitter feed is Tony, Tony_Devenish, DEVENISH, no O in Devenish, and you can see clips of me and other Assembly members challenging Mr. Khan on his records. Of course, he's got a fifth year. Normally there'd have been an election on the 7th of May. He's had a 4-year term. This year he is unelected, and the elections are now being put off until next May, understandably because of coronavirus. So we have another year to hold him to account. Again, any issues that Westminster North residents have, please write to me, tony.devenish@london.gov.uk is my email address, and I'd be happy to answer any question you wish to ask the Mayor, either in a written form or orally once a month.
You're very good, because I was going to ask you to give your email address. So thank you for doing that. And as you said, follow you on Twitter and on Facebook, and obviously for anything pertinent, for individual, email you in to see if what you can do to help.
And Instagram too for the younger members who are on Instagram.
Are you going to be telling me you're on Snapchat next or TikTok? Are you on TikTok?
Not yet, but with an election year coming up, I may be asking for your help on setting that up, Henry.
Okay, I look forward to watching you on TikTok. That will be a great joy. Look, thank you for we've gone through all the questions that people have sent in, and thank you everyone for sending those, posting those, and putting them in. And thank you for answering them. I did want to finish on one question, which is that politics is about caring for the people you represent, and I know you care very deeply. And so I just wanted to talk about, because the discussion is always about the policy and not the emotions, and actually politicians are generally in for the emotions, that what they're doing to help. And so I'd just like to ask, what's the moment in your political life that's made you the saddest, and the moment of political impact that has made you the happiest?
I think the saddest has to be, I've had a fascinating 4 years on the Assembly so far. The moment, the most humbling moment had to be the Grenfell fire. Nobody, I think, forgets where they were in London when they heard about that terrible fire. Obviously, North Kensington is also part of my constituency, and how Grenfell, the immediate incident itself, and how how we've got through that terrible tragedy, all those, the families and the loved ones who passed away, those that were injured. It's still obviously the number one concern. I spend much of my time working with both Westminster Council and the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, and obviously the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea are leading on that, and there's a public inquiry at the moment. But that's got to be the saddest moment, of course. In terms of the happiest moment, dare I say the general?
No, so I know what it is. It's talking to me right now.
Well, exactly.
Was it a close second? Okay, go on. What's the real one?
It was last December's general election, because it had been a very tough year in politics, tough several years with Brexit and the debate on both sides of the argument, and obviously the 2017 general election and Grenfell and the borough elections of 2018. And at the end of it, despite my party is not perfect, the Conservative Party is not perfect like any other party, but when there's a choice, a democratic choice, the people have to decide. And I was honoured that they chose Boris Johnson as Prime Minister in the Conservative government in December. And, ultimately, I have the honour of being a local government figure in both borough and GLA, but you need a strong, decisive, pro-free market, everything you need in an economy to make sure both London and Westminster North and the UK thrive. So my highlight has to be the general election victory, and Mr. Corbyn retiring subsequently.
Thank you so much for joining us and joining this today, answering all the questions and so forth rightly and in such an interesting way. Very much appreciate it. Really, thank you for all your work you're doing in both the council and the assembly. It is incredibly important. I think never has well, I can't say never, but in recent times, the importance of your political leaders is critical, and we're seeing that in, I think, the leadership at the national level. I think the council, Westminster Council, has been doing amazing work, and I think we're seeing that lack of leadership in Khan. And I know you're trying to push as hard as you can to get him to do the right things, but you are the opposition. It's limited, and we want obviously a Conservative mayor next time. And I think we're all working for you to be re-elected and for Sean to be elected as mayor. But I didn't want you to go away without saying thank you very much for all your hard work, both the things that everyone sees and the things that they don't, because I know a lot of the personal work that you do. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Henry. And if I just finally say, actually, you mentioned Sean Bailey. I probably should have mentioned Sean more during the interview. Sean Bailey is a fantastic London mayoral candidate for the Conservatives. And if any Westminster residents would like, or businesses would like to invite me or Sean to any events, we are always available. And if you have any particular issues, as I say, please email me or contact me at any time. Thank you very much, Henry, for all you do. The Conservative Association of Westminster North is very close to my heart.
Thank you. And actually, you told people to get in contact. So do you want to give out your email and Twitter again?
My email is tony.devenish, DEVENISH, at London, LONDON.gov.uk. And my social media, the Twitter has everything on it, at Tony_Devenish, and it also feeds through. You'll see the addresses, my Facebook, Tony Devenish AM, and my Instagram, again, Tony Devenish AM. Thank you, Henry.
And soon pleasure. To have your
enjoy sunshine.
No, and soon to have your TikTok with all your trendy dances on, which we are very, very much looking forward to. No, well, look, thank you very much. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you very much.
And to those watching, just to say thank you for joining us, and also say thank you for and to invite you to join. If you support us, come and back us, come and become a member of Westminster North and the Conservative Party. It's people like you that allow us to be an organisation and to do the work we do in terms of backing our politicians and getting working for a Tory council, working to have a Tory mayor, and obviously our part in trying to have in the national question. Thank you very much. Thanks again to Tony for joining us. We'll be doing more of these, so do follow us on both Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you again, and look forward to seeing you soon.